of these social engineers is really anti-family, anti-human, anti-individual. It's anti-Renaissance. It's like a corporate Borg. It's so alien that just my very, very genetic code says resist this with everything you've got.
Yeah, it says it basically says you will have no freedoms except those that we grant you. That's basically what their whole program is going to end up doing.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. William Binney, former technical director of the National Security Agency, is our guest. We'll take some calls coming up in the next segment. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. Looking at these bills, looking at the legislation, looking at the things that are being done, what is your overall view of the announcements that are being made, the things that are being engaged in?
Well, I mean, some of the things they're trying to pass, like the CISPA, putting it into this big funding bill and burying it in there and passing it through is just another way of corrupting the process and getting it through under basically the cover of a massive bill. Those are the kinds of things they're sneaking through, and they're doing it by the leadership of our Congress is doing it. Republicans and Democrats are all supporting this. They're no different, really. So they're doing it because they know they can't stand out in the open and say the things they want to say in a bill. So they've got to do it in some kind of under the cover or kind of in a sneaky way to get it through. And so that gives them, and then they say that authorizes them the power to do whatever they want to do, which in fact I contest. None of that is constitutional, and any time it reaches in a constitutional test, it will fail.
And they were caught doing it all in secret and lying to the public and using it against political targets. It's all a fraud.
Exactly. Right. And they're afraid of having constitutional tests when, in fact, that is the true test of a law. Does it really conform to the Constitution or not? If it doesn't, it's not a law.
Well, clearly, if they can get away with this, they can get away with anything. I have been talking to a lot of big Hollywood people, a lot of big government people, and they are just terrified. They say, oh, I thought you were crazy about the NSA 15 years ago, Alex, but now it's all admitted, and I'm scared. I'm not going to speak out. So that chilling effect is kind of working. Don't these people understand giving into the fear is what ensures that the real next phase of oppression comes in?
Yeah, that's the whole point that I was making, too, by saying if you acquiesce in a democracy, you'll lose it. So you got to stand up and fight. That's what the people in a democracy are supposed to do. You're supposed to stand up for your rights.
I know you never talk to colleagues at the NSA anymore because they'll try to indict you. And I know they've been harassing a lot of your other colleagues and folks, but isn't there a sense of shame? I mean, I know there is because look at all the leaks that they're having to fix intelligence, that they're funding Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I mean, I am seeing a lot of good signs. What I mentioned earlier and what Cy Hirsch is reporting, that there's basically a soft counter coup inside the military going on against a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right because there's some other whistleblowers like the four fellows who came out to blow the whistle on the droning and basically the random slaughter going on there. So there's that too. Plus I know internally, well, they're still so afraid of going into a court of law to be constitutionally challenged that it tells you that they're afraid of sunshine. You know, shining the light on. It's like picking up a rock and watching the. I draw the analogy, when you pick up a rock, you can see all the bugs and worms squirm to get out of the sunlight. Well, that's basically what our political leaders are doing now. And I'm not differentiating between any of the parties. They all seem to be a part of it. So I just throw them all together. If anybody does this kind of support for things that are simply taking away our rights and assembling knowledge in the central government about the people in the country, I mean, that's fundamentally what our Constitution was supposed to stop, and it was designed that way. The people were supposed to know what the government was doing. The government was not supposed to know what they were doing unless they had probable cause.
Instead, they open the borders up, don't check anybody, but stick a magnifying glass down our throats. I mean, it really is the breaking of the will of the American people. And I just can't believe how many men I know that are scared now to know we have a tyrannical government. You know, the whole thing's not tyrannical, though. There are a lot of good people in the government and in the corporations that are trying to stop this. We all have to speak out and get involved now, and we can turn the tide against this, and you're doing that.
That's my point. Yeah, I think the more people who stand up against this, the better chance we have of stopping it here initially, and then trying to initiate a stop around the world. Because we started this infection, and it went through the British now, GCHQ, the Germans, the B&D, and various other countries.
Let's talk about that national debate, sir. We've got a break. William Binney,
okay.
exposefacts.org. Want to wish you a Merry Christmas as well, sir. What a super patriot we've got on the line. And also have a dinner with this guy. Unbelievable. Fourth, fifth, sixth dimensional level thinking. You can tell why. He pretty much built the NSA that's there today, folks. He is the master. The Pentagon ran a major PSYOP operation this summer. Jade Helm. Day one, we said it wasn't a military takeover or gun confiscation. We said it was a conditioning operation for troops on the streets of America for civil unrest and to also practice in the United States, but also overseas, using databases of information to roll in and out of cities undetected and to master the human domain. And the commanding general over it gave a slideshow that we've played parts of, admitting it's about mastering the human domain and controlling the population. I then ran into some special forces people. One of them very well known, but I'm not going to say his name. He'll probably end up being on the show. And they said, look, we all saw right through that. And the PSYOP they ran saying that this was this weekend, saying that you said we were coming to take over. Believe me, Alex, no one in SF, Army, Marines, Navy, no one buys any of it. And we know that's why they're rolling out with autonomous drones, robots, all of it. We get it. We know you're dead on. So again, I'm not lionizing the military. I've always been critical of it being used and just worshipped mindlessly, you know, where the military's paying for them to, you know, have patriotic stuff at the Super Bowl. That's to sell the state as if it's the military with stolen glory. But they've got a big problem in that the boots on the ground, right up to the generals, they're trying to put all these weird pencil pushers in and all these weird politicos who've never even been involved in combat. They're putting, you know, guys that are political hacks in, especially under Obama. That really endangers us against foreign governments, the delusion of the Hillary Clinton, the Obamas, the neocons, none of them have been in the military, to go start these wars with Russia. I mean, it's not just what William Binney was about to get into, former technical director of the NSA, with the situation with all these different governments and all the different systems spying, and there's too much data, so it makes everybody blind. It's beyond that. It's that they're starting wars with Russia. They're starting wars in Syria. They're doing unprecedented bad stuff. And even our top generals go, it's immoral. Why overthrow a country and have Al-Qaeda come in, that's what ISIS is, and murder the Christians? Well, what? I mean, it's just so nasty. And it's not even Machiavelli, because it doesn't bring down Iran, their regime. It actually makes them look moral. I mean, it's hubris, it's arrogance, but you could also look at it like they're globalists running this. They want to discredit America. William Binney, I want you to get back into the points that you got cut off at the break on, but separately, being at the highest levels of the NSA, I know there's a method to some of the madness. Clearly they're running things, but also there's a lot of hubris and arrogance, and it really is scary to see a bunch of chicken hawks playing God, and Hillary saying she came to Libya, she saw Gaddafi died, when the woman couldn't fight her way out of a wet paper bag. There's something obscene about a lazy politico shooting her mouth off about killing people. It just reeks of classic flaming megalomania, sir.
Yes, and in fact, I've been amazed at the arrogance of the intelligence community, even to our own government. I mean, they just seem to have them all wrapped around their finger, much like J. Edgar Hoover did with most of the politicians in the House and Senate and the White House back when he was the director of the FBI for 40 years or so. So, I mean, he had information and knowledge about them, and if they didn't know that he did, they believed he did. So that's how he kept his power, and this is getting very similar to that. but on a much larger scale. And I would point out that what's happening now is what we impeached and indicted Richard Nixon for, only he was only doing a minor, minuscule amount compared to what they're doing now.
Yes, sir. Don't the elites know that historically every time bringing in an oppression, a tyranny, a panopticon system like this will always end up destroying them, that they're going to be the #1 targets of what they've created? They've dug a pit for us. Won't they be the ones that fall into it historically?
Well, I think if it gets really violent, like in World War II and so on, yes, they would be the ones to pay for it. But essentially, I think they're banking on the fact that this will be a long, drawn-out thing, and so they'll be able to pass it on to their successors and that they won't have to pay anything directly for it. So in other words, they'll be able to get by through their lifetime without having suffered any consequences, but their successors will be the ones to suffer that.
And by then, they believe technology will outrace that and they'll be secure, or they'll dumb the public down enough to do it. You're absolutely right. They are building a lot of redoubts, though, in different circuitous areas around the world right now, hedging their bets.
Yes, and, I personally like to get right in their face because they shrink away every time. It's a matter of, again, it's the idea of sunlight. They're afraid of sunlight, because then they will be the ones to suffer the consequences and the results of what they've done. That's what they're trying to avoid.
Like Karl Rove said, they control reality. No, they don't. They just avoid reality. It's called being delusional. William Binney, incredible to have you here. Other technical things people need to know about what's happening in the world right now, sir?
Well, it's basically I think the greatest threat is to allow companies to continue to manage and have this kind of information about people, because then they have the ability, like we were talking about China, then they have the ability to go to China and see and then influence them in a way that would be very similar of accumulating information on individual citizens, in their countries. So the companies, and they're international companies, so this is getting spread internationally, accelerated through that process. And I think that's probably one of the major things that we really should be dealing with here in this country and in Europe. I know the Europeans are trying to deal with it now, and I'm trying to give my 2 cents and contributions to them, and hopefully they'll start a worldwide effort that might be able to turn this around.
Yes, sir.
But I think holding companies responsible for the information they're holding is, and in fact probably even denying them the legal right to hold that data, might be the best option eventually. Well,
if folks... And, of course, when I have you on, sir, you're so influential. You have so much courage. It's just true. I don't normally gush like this with guests unless they deserve it. You're out there doing so many interviews, have gone through so much to warn people. I try to bounce stuff off of you, obviously, to see if you think it's accurate from my perspective. And it is even more frightening that pretty much always you concur with my basic analysis of it, just as a layperson looking at the larger geopolitical and cultural ramifications. But we know why they're trying to ban white Christmas and brown paper bags and saying if you serve Chinese food at a school lunch program, it's racist. They're projecting all these things that don't exist, that aren't really racist or discriminatory, because we're all being discriminated against by this new technocratic system being set up, where if you're not a good little New World Order person, you won't be able to have a job or live or get a hotel room or travel. They're announcing all this. This is classical discrimination and oppression. And so they want us to define all these phantom menaces now, while the greatest acts of institutionalized tyranny the world's ever seen are being codified into a physical surveillance grid that, as you said, is beyond any fantastical dream of George Orwell.
Yes, and I just liken this to the case of the Wizard of Oz. This is the scenario they're painting, is to basically pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, when in fact the man behind the curtain is them, and they're doing some very bad things.
Well, I think it's very important for the establishment to realize, let me ask you this, being up there at the highest levels. I know that the people at the mid-level and even high level that are patriots, I actually have bashed the government a lot. They've called me anti-government because I'm a libertarian. I'm not. But I've actually been impressed as I've gotten higher level, gotten to really know a lot of influential people across the board, that I find in government, actually, more moral people, more awake people, more concerned people, especially when you get higher up. It's very strange. Not to the